No one knew her name. When she walked into the room with her gray cardigan, old bag, and silent steps, everyone thought she was just there to clean. But just a few minutes later, with a single stroke of chalk, she silenced all minds. This is the true story of an invisible woman who cracked the system with her intelligence. You never know where true potential will come from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest voices. When Leah Frank walked into the conference room with heavy steps, no one in the room looked up. But she wasn't just a woman walking in. She was an intelligence that had gotten used to being invisible. The simple gray cardigan she wore felt like a uniform for a woman who carried the weight of years but never gave up. She held tightly onto her notebook. Almost no one knew her. Those who did only recognized her from the cleaning staff. No one knew she had been working late nights for months on the Riemann hypothesis or developing her own notation on complex functions. They thought she was just an ordinary person. And that day, everyone's opinion was about to change. At the beginning of the seminar, the person who took the podium was Professor Leonard Weiss, the head of the math department. With his silver hair, perfectly tailored suit, and cold gaze, he sent a message to everyone in the room. I represent wisdom here, and you will only listen. Leonard Weiss was known for his arrogance. People admired his intelligence, but he never believed in equality. For him, knowledge was a privilege for the elite. Leah sat in the back corner. Unlike the other students, her notebook wasn't new. Its pages were crumpled and its edges curled. But what was inside? It would have put any PhD thesis to shame. When the presentation began, Leah watched without blinking. As Weiss presented his new method on complex differential equations, there was a deep silence in the room. When his gaze swept across the room, it met Lee's. And that familiar expression appeared on his face: contempt. This was a look Leah had known for years. It was the same look the manager who had hired her as a cleaner once gave her. Don't push yourself too hard, he had said. You belong somewhere else. But Lee's place was never while she was cleaning or sitting in the shadows. She had always created her own place within the numbers. At the end of the presentation, Weiss arrogantly asked, "Any questions?" At that moment, Lee's hand instinctively went up. A hum filled the room. The students turned and looked at her. Some chuckled. Weiss squinted and asked, "Yes, ma'am." The disdain in his voice spread through the room like ice. Lee's voice didn't shake, but it was a bit hoarse. In the fourth step, the variable transformation you made, doesn't it conflict with the boundary conditions? A sudden silence fell over the room. A few students exchanged glances. One chuckled quietly. Professor Weiss raised his eyebrows. "Your name?" he asked. "Leah Frank." "What department?" Leah hesitated for a moment. "Maintenance and facilities management," she said. Whispers started to rise. Weiss smiled, but that smile was full of mockery, not kindness. "A member of the maintenance team. And you claim to have found a problem in my equation?" With those words, a few students laughed out loud. Leah squeezed her notebook, but didn't look away. "It's not a mistake, just a possible inconsistency," she added. But Weiss interrupted her. "I think you should leave these complicated matters behind and focus on something more accessible." Leah, left in silence, lowered her head. Did she regret it? Maybe. But there was something inside her that couldn't be suppressed. She didn't want to back down now. Weiss turned to the board as if he wanted to teach her a lesson. "Since you're so curious, maybe you'd like to show us your skills." He extended the chalk. "Go ahead, the stage is yours." Leah didn't move from her seat. All eyes were on her. Her heart was racing, but she took one step, then another. As she walked toward the board, every step felt like a rebellion against a life that had been ignored for years. She took the chalk in her hand. Weiss had written an advanced differential equation on the board. "Make it something simple," Weiss said mockingly. "After all, we value diversity." The audience erupted in sarcastic laughter. Leah turned to the board. This equation was not unfamiliar to her. In fact, she had spent many sleepless nights over this problem. Her hands trembled at first. One of the students in the back whispered, "It's painful to even watch." But the mathematician inside Leah could not be silenced. The numbers began to shape in her mind. When the chalk touched the board, the world went quiet. She drew the first line on the board, then the second. She felt like she was back in her childhood, solving puzzles on the back of newspapers. Every symbol, every operation pulled her deeper into her own universe. The murmur in the room had stopped. A few minutes later, when she finished the equation, she took a step back. Weiss approached the board, his gaze carefully studying the lines. And he stopped. His pupils widened. "Correct," he said with difficulty. "This is correct." But then he shrugged. Of course, anyone who knows basic analysis could solve a problem like this. But at that moment, an academic in the front row Dr. Helen Roth stood up, squinted, and said, "This isn't just a solution. This is a different approach." Weiss quickly erased the board, his unease clearly visible. "Let's try something more challenging," he said, writing a new equation, one from his own research, an unpublished problem. The air in the room suddenly thickened. This wasn't the moment when Leah was being tested anymore. This was the moment when she would carry her past on her shoulders and write her future. And this was just the beginning. As Leah Frank stood in front of the second equation, time seemed to freeze for a moment. Everyone in the room was holding their breath, their eyes glued to the board. No one made a sound, no one moved. What was written on the board this time was far beyond a simple math problem. The equation, written in Professor Weiss's handwriting, represented the essence of a theoretical model being developed on advanced quantum encryption. It hadn't been published anywhere yet, and most academics only had a surface-level understanding of it. It was a complex mathematical beast, and now, a woman known as a maintenance worker was facing it. At first, Leah didn't recognize the structure. The symbols were unconventional. Some terms weren't found in the sources she was used to. She held the chalk under the board for a moment. Her fingers were sweating. Taking a step back would have been logical. No one expected her to achieve something like this. Maybe if she gave up now, no one would blame her. But just as she was about to turn back, a spark flickered in her mind. The scientific article she found a few weeks ago at the public library in the middle of the night. She had read it with tired eyes, trying to understand it, but then thought she had forgotten it. Now it was coming to life right in front of her. She decided to start from a corner. Gathering her thoughts, she wrote the first symbol on the board, then the second. At first, she was slow and cautious. Then, as her heart matched the rhythm of her steps, the chalk moved faster on the board. The numbers, variables, boundary conditions started coming together in her mind. The students in the room, instead of taking notes, had their eyes fixed on her. Dr. Helen Roth, sitting in the front row, was leaning forward in silence. Her eyes were following every transformation Leah marked carefully. Weiss, however, had frozen in his seat. His expression had turned into a battle between astonishment and stubborn arrogance. But then something happened. The equation seemed to stall at one point. Leah paused in the middle of solving the structure. Her eyes were fixed on the lines on the board. There was a missing link. If she made a mistake here, the whole chain of solutions could collapse. At that moment, Professor Weiss stood up. "I think that's enough," he said, his voice mocking yet seemingly relieved. "This level of work is difficult even for experienced researchers. After all," wait a second. Lee's voice was clear this time. It wasn't loud, but it was firm. She reached out and stopped Weiss from taking the chalk. Her eyes never left the board. The room went silent again. It was as if everyone was listening intently at the same time. Within a few seconds, Leah wrote a transformation in the middle of the board using a complex symmetry. She restructured the algebraic expression. It wasn't a solution move, it was an intuition. These kinds of transformations weren't taught in standard training. And that's why, exactly why, the academics in the room were stunned. A student in the back whispered without realizing it. She's solving the quantum variance." Dr. Roth, her face full of astonishment, nodded slightly. "She's breaking down that structure with dimensional analysis," she said, almost to herself. Professor Weiss, however, didn't budge. His eyes were glued to the new equation Leah had formed on the board. The solution wasn't just correct, it was innovative. It applied a method that wasn't found in any textbook but was hinted at in some recent publications and still debated. And all of this was being done by a woman who hadn't had formal education, but had worked alone with her own notes. When Leah added the final lines on the right side of the board, she slowly put down the chalk. She turned around and looked at the center of the room. At that moment, there was no applause, because no one knew what to say. That silence wasn't born from failure, but from the boundaries of a mind being pushed. The first sound after the silence came from Dr. Roth. This method, I've only seen it once before. It was published last month in the International Quantum Mathematics Journal. The Liu Takahashi method. but only a few experts can understand it. Then Roth fixed her gaze on Leah. How do you know about this? Leah didn't know what to say. Her mouth was dry, but she didn't hide. I don't know, she said. I didn't know it was called that. I just looked and I saw it was there. Meanwhile, Weiss had put his hands in his pockets, avoiding eye contact. His arrogant expression was gone, replaced with a mix of astonishment and concern. Roth, moving closer, examined the solution on the board. This isn't just intuitive. This is creative. This is a publishable solution, she said. The students in the room slowly started to recover. Whispers grew louder. A few people took pictures of the board with their phones. Some wiped their eyes, while others raised their hands to applaud Leah. But Leah stood frozen there. This was the moment when the knowledge she had kept inside for years became visible for the first time. Chalk dust was on her hands, her fingertips trembling, but her eyes were shining. She was no longer someone who was invisible. The applause that echoed through the room hadn't yet settled into everyone's memory when Leah Frank quietly stepped to the side among the crowd. Not knowing what to do or where to look, she clutched her notebook tightly. She had completed her solution, yes. But this wasn't a victory on stage. It was the revelation of a secret. The notebooks she had scribbled in alone for years, her deep but hidden love for mathematics. Now, they were all laid bare in front of everyone. She had become so accustomed to staying invisible in life that being this much in the spotlight almost felt like a threat. Yet, there was also a voice inside her whispering that something real was starting for the first time. Professor Leonard Weiss was still standing in front of the board, but this time, he wasn't in his usual confident posture. He no longer looked upright and self-assured. Instead, he appeared as though he were stuck in place. Leah noticed a few students leaving the room, heads lowered, some not even looking at him. This was shame. For a man who saw himself as an academic authority, it was the hardest thing to accept. But then, Dr. Helen Roth, while taking a photo of the solution on the board, turned to Weiss and spoke with a cold expression. This solution has clearly solved the unspeakable problem you mentioned, and it was done by someone with no academic credentials. You have a lot to think about, Leonard. Weiss didn't respond. The words were stuck in his throat. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he needed to stay silent. Leah was about to gather her bag and leave when Roth approached her. This time, there wasn't the usual scientific seriousness on her face, but a sort of admiration. This solution is not just correct, she said slowly. It also presents a new perspective. Are you aware of that? This work will get noticed by research labs. Leah looked away, a bit embarrassed, a bit shy. I was just trying to solve it. I usually do this at night to distract myself. Sometimes when I can't sleep. Those notebooks, Roth said, her tone becoming a bit more serious. How many do you have? Leah hesitated for a moment before answering. 7, maybe 8. Different colors. Some are filled with numbers, some are like sketches. But I've never shown them to anyone. Dr. Roth nodded slightly. I'd like to see them. Seriously, maybe you came here this morning on a cleaning break, but this afternoon, your identity could change. We could make a future plan with you. These words hit Leah like a lightning bolt. Future. When had she ever embraced that word? Until now, she had always just tried to get by, pay her rent, and send her daughter to school. The future was a luxury, not a dream, for her. But just then, her phone vibrated. The vibration from her bag reminded her of the real world. The babysitter, she thought to herself. She rummaged through her bag and checked her phone. 5 missed calls. The real world, outside the world of mathematics, was still there. A mother's responsibilities were filled with unsolved variables. Dr. Roth sensed her hesitation. I don't mean to pressure you, she said softly. But minds like yours don't come across every day. This morning, they might have seen you as a statistic, but by tonight, you could be one of the university's greatest opportunities. Leah slowly nodded. The notebooks are at home. I can bring them tomorrow if you'd like. Roth's face lit up. Bring them. All of them. I and a few academics would like to review them, especially your quantum solutions. These could be the start of serious research. Leah didn't know what to say at that moment. She simply lowered her head, thanked Roth, and headed for the exit. As she walked through the conference room door, she felt like something was changing behind the university's towering walls. One of the students who had exited before her stopped her. She was a young woman, studying engineering, with tears in her eyes. For the first time, Someone inspired me, she said. If it weren't for you, I don't think I would have ever had the courage to ask. Leah smiled, stunned. Maybe this was the first echo of real success. When she stepped outside, the air had cooled. The sky was gray, but inside Leah, there was a light shining. Maybe, for the first time, she had seen her own intelligence not as an obstacle, but as a key. And this key was about to open a door that had been closed for years. Her notebooks were no longer just pages. They were about to be opened to rewrite a life. The next morning, Leah Frank woke up quietly before the sun rose. Her daughter was still asleep. The house was silent, but Lee's mind was noisy. The seminar from the day before had stirred a storm inside her. She hadn't felt so visible in a long time. Now, as she made her way to the university campus, what she carried in her bag wasn't just notebooks, it was also the weight of an identity she had suppressed for years. This morning, someone was going to look at her notes. And maybe, for the first time, someone would take her real intelligence seriously. She sat down on the chair in the corner of the kitchen and opened her bag. She pulled out the stacked notebooks one by one. Some were filled with scratches. Others had dried coffee stains on the edges. But all of them were full of life. During sleepless nights, lunch breaks, and waiting rooms at the hospital, in all those moments, Leah had seen the world through the lens of numbers. Maybe there wasn't a neat academic structure in those notebooks, but between the pages, a genius shone. When she arrived at the university, the sky was still gray. But this time, a few people who recognized her didn't turn their heads. In fact, when she made eye contact with one of the assistants, they gave her a small nod. That small gesture made a lifetime of difference to Leah. People were now looking at her not just as her position on her ID badge, but at the depth of her mind. On the third floor of the rectorate building, in the meeting room, names were waiting for her. Dr. Helen Roth had previously mentioned that a few research assistants, professors, and even the deputy department head would be there. When she walked through the door, everyone fell silent. This time, the silence wasn't out of disdain, it was out of curiosity and respect. Leah placed her notebooks on the table. "It's all here," she said. "I don't know if it's meaningful, but my world is made of these." Roth put on her glasses and opened the first notebook. The first few pages were silently examined. Then, a page was turned, and suddenly, the air in the room shifted. A professor neutral-faced, with gray hair looked up. This factorization technique. Did you come up with this?" Leah nodded slightly. "I was thinking it up last year while coming home from a night shift. I jotted it down right away on the bus." The man turned back to the page and scribbled something. Roth opened the second notebook. This one was filled with complex algebraic structures and abstract symmetry analyses. Roth's expression was growing more serious. "I haven't seen this anywhere," she said. "I mean, there are similar theories, but you've created your own formulation, and it's quite consistent." At that moment, someone who had joined the meeting late took a magazine out of their bag. A similar structure was proposed by a lab in Germany last month. It's still being verified. But here, in Lee's notebook, there's almost a complete version. Everyone's face in the room had turned a different color. No one had expected such talent from a quiet woman in a uniform. But the truth was this. Leah had spent years developing her science without anyone seeing, outside the academic system, but right at the heart of knowledge. Finally, Weiss took one of the notebooks from the table. He silently flipped through a few pages. This man, who was always used to asserting superiority with words, was now silent. His eyes followed the logic on the pages, and in some places, he nodded involuntarily. Then, for the first time, he truly looked at Leah. "This needs to be examined carefully," he said. The sentence was simple, but it was probably the greatest compliment that could have come from him. Roth turned her head. "Leah Frank, we're considering offering you a scholarship. Not right now, but we can start you in an accelerated academic program. If you prefer, you can start as an independent researcher and later be officially admitted at the PhD level." Lee's hands trembled. While they were still talking, she swallowed hard with just one sentence. "Is this real?" Dr. Roth smiled. "Because you're real, this is real. Now, we'll be seeing you, not just in this room, but in publications, projects, and classrooms." At that moment, Leah Frank opened another notebook. Her favorite one, the one with a small heart drawing on the corner, given to her by Lily when she was 11. The first page inside read, "Mom, you can solve anything." That day, Leah didn't just put her notebooks on the table, she put her past there too. And for the first time, she was there as the one shaping the future. Leah Frank's name was no longer whispered in the university corridors, it was spoken openly. When students saw her, they stopped. Some even turned to ask her questions. Assistants and research fellows invited her to meetings. She was becoming a prominent figure in every session. But this rapid rise brought along a quiet storm. Because Leah wasn't just a genius, she was a reality that came from outside the system, shaking it up. And for some, that was unforgivable. With Dr. Helen Roth's support, Leah was given a temporary research office at the university. It was small, but it was her corner. She spent her days reviewing incoming files, commenting on some articles, and even started mentoring a few undergraduate students. But every success was disturbing to some eyes, especially one pair, Leonard Weiss's. Professor Weiss had initially preferred to ignore Lee's success. But when the publication committee recommended that her solution be published in a journal, things changed. Because now, Lee's name would be mentioned alongside his in the academic literature. This not only threatened his ego, but also the academic platform he had built. He was a man who believed knowledge was a birthright. Leah, on the other hand, was a self-taught mathematician who had come from life. And that fact was cracking the image Weiss had spent years building. This tension finally erupted. Leah had been invited to speak at one of the university's advanced seminars. The topic, quantum encryption and alternative algorithmic approaches. On the day of the conference, the room was packed. Students were standing, listening intently. As Leah wrote her theoretical structures on the board, some hands writing notes sped up, and some mouths remained open. But right in the middle of the presentation, Weiss stood up from the back row. "This method has not yet been approved by an independent jury," he said. His voice was loud, but there was suppressed anger in his tone. Presenting a new method in front of undergraduate students might not align with academic responsibility. A silence fell over the room. Eyes shifted between him and Leah. Leah paused for a moment in front of the board. Her heart raced, but the familiar calmness was on her face. "Mr. Weiss," she said, her voice clear, "my method is an alternative solution proposal. It is open for discussion. And yes, just because something hasn't been accepted before doesn't mean it won't be accepted one day." There was no applause, but something echoed in everyone's minds. This sentence felt like a truth crashing into the decaying stones of the system. After the conference, Leah locked herself in her office. In those moments, she felt like she was not just engaged in a scientific debate, but in an unseen battle. Weiss wasn't alone. Some former academics saw her rise as romanticizing ignorance, while others said, quality is being compromised for popularity. None of this was said out loud, but it was felt in every sentence, every glance. And as if that wasn't enough, one afternoon, the phone rang. Her babysitter called with a tearful voice. Lily, Leah's daughter, had gotten into an argument at school. "Your mom's a cleaner. She can't be a genius," she had fought with a student. Lily was entering a period of silence, retreating into herself. That day, Leah understood more clearly how academic rise echoed at home. The two sat together in the kitchen. Lily's eyes were downcast. "You've changed, Mom," she said quietly. "But I loved you just the way you were for us. Now everyone wants you. I feel like I'm losing you." In that moment, Lee's eyes filled with tears. Math had won her respect, but maybe she had lost her daughter a little. She placed her hand on Lily's shoulder. "I promise you," she said, "no matter who I become, I'm still your mom first. Even if the world applauds me, the only person I'm applauding is you." That evening, Leah Frank truly understood what she was fighting, not just against the academic system, but the battle to reclaim the voice of women who were forced into invisibility. And a mother's struggle to keep both herself and her daughter standing at the same time. 6 months had passed. Since that first time she had walked up to the board, her life had evolved at an unbelievable speed. Leah Frank was no longer an unknown. Her name appeared on the university website under the status of guest researcher. Some of the equations she had solved were displayed on the walls of the institute. She was receiving invitations to academic conferences, and her ideas were being published not only behind classroom doors, but across the country. But to Leah, the greatest success was the spark that had returned to her daughter Lily's eyes. The silent accusations had been replaced by the admiring gaze of a child who was proud of her mother. One morning, a phone call from Dr. Helen Roth opened another door in Lee's life. The MIT Scholarship Committee wants to meet with you, Roth said. I sent them some examples from your notebooks. The feedback is extraordinary. For a moment, Leah couldn't speak. That prestigious university, the one she had only seen on screens, the one whose name she had read on book covers, was now asking to meet with her. Everything was developing so quickly that sometimes she still imagined herself cleaning empty classrooms on campus. But that image was now in the past. Her gray cardigan might still be the same, but the woman inside it had completely changed. The meeting was held online. The committee members didn't just ask her questions, they listened with admiration. Her clarity in explaining her ideas, her intuitive ability to solidify theories with examples, things that seemed almost unbelievable for someone with no formal academic training, impressed them. At the end of the meeting, when the committee chair said, "We want to offer you not only the scholarship, but also the right to establish an independent research group," Leah felt like she had crossed an irreversible threshold. But at that moment, hearing Weiss's name made her feel a bit strange. The former professor had suggested at last week's faculty meeting that her solution be integrated into the university's official curriculum. Roth had told her about it with both surprise and emotion. While Weiss might not have apologized, scientific respect spoke louder than words. A week later, the university held a special award ceremony for Leah. It was small, but it carried great meaning. Students, academics, and guests, they were all there. When Leah was invited to the podium, she didn't know what to say at first. She closed the notes she was holding. She took a deep breath and spoke directly from her heart. "I never dreamed of standing on this podium. I'm a mother who scribbles in notebooks at the end of her child's bed, who spins formulas in her head during laundry breaks. The road to knowledge is never a straight line. For some of us, that road passes through equations solved while holding a mop, through graphs drawn on lonely nights. So, if someone doesn't see you, it doesn't mean you're invisible. It just means they're looking in the wrong place." The applause erupted, but Lee's eyes only focused on one person, Lily. In the front row, standing tall, she was looking at her mother. That gaze was stronger than a 1,000-page paper. What brought her there wasn't just knowledge, but determination, patience, and motherhood. After the ceremony, Leah went for a walk alone in the park outside the campus. She didn't take off her gray cardigan, because that cardigan wasn't just an old piece of clothing, it was the silent witness to her journey. In every stitch, there was a night. In every sleeve, a hesitation. In every pocket, a struggle. Now, all of these had come together to shape her, from an invisible woman to a force that shapes her own universe. Sitting on a bench, a young female student approached her hesitantly. "Leah Frank?" she asked. Leah looked up and smiled. The young woman handed her a booklet. It contained problems she was struggling to solve. "Could you help me?" she asked shyly. Leah took the file, flipped through a few pages. Then, she looked up and simply said, "Of course. But first, tell me how you think." Because now, she was no longer just a problem solver. She was a bearer of light. And that light had come from inside a gray cardigan.